Underwater, a man heard a voice calling him the new Demon King and giving him the title Great Sin in the Realm of Shadows. Moments later, he woke up in an unfamiliar room feeling lost and unsure of how he got there. The only thing he could remember was his name, Sotha. While he was still trying to make sense of everything, a woman approached and asked if he was awake. She then congratulated him on his grand birth and addressed him as her master. Curious about who she was, he asked for her identity. She introduced herself as Rina, a homunculus maid sent to serve the new Demon King. Her words only added to his confusion, making him question whether he really was the Demon King and where exactly he was. In response, she explained that he was in the dungeon he was meant to rule, and that his memory loss was a result of his rebirth. Realizing that if his past was forgotten, it must have existed, he started doubting whether he had truly been born into this world. Before he could think further, Rina interrupted, mentioning that she hadn't learned his name yet. Just as he was about to respond, the voice he had heard earlier came back to him, calling him Great Sin. With that in mind, he introduced himself as both Great Sin of the Seven Deadly Sins and Sotha. Hearing this, Rina declared the birth of Demon King Sotha, the ruler of the Seven Deadly Sins. Right after, his mind was flooded with information about his abilities, which Rina clarified as the system providing him details about his skills. Going through the information, he saw that he was classified as rank S, but despite his increasing Demon Lord level, he couldn't learn new skills. The only creatures he could summon from the dungeon core were weak rank G monsters. This revelation took Rina by surprise, and when she asked him to confirm, he admitted that he could only summon G-rank creatures. Seeing her reaction, he asked if that was a problem. She then explained that as a demon lord, he was responsible for managing a dungeon, leading monsters, expanding its influence, defeating adventurers, and gaining power. In the end, his ultimate goal was to prepare for the Demon King Wars and rise as the Supreme Dark Lord. Overwhelmed by the weight of this responsibility, Sotha hesitated and asked again if he truly could only summon the weakest monsters. Rina confirmed it once more. This made him realize something even more frustrating. No matter how much he leveled up, he wouldn't be able to gain new skills. The game Deadly Sin had imposed a restriction that prevented Demon Kings from unlocking abilities beyond their initial set, effectively putting them at a dead end. Pushing those thoughts aside, Rina began explaining the dungeon's structure and led him to the core room, the very heart of the dungeon and the source of his life force. If the core were ever destroyed, he would disappear along with it, making its protection his top priority. As he processed this, he learned that attracting humans to the dungeon was necessary for its growth. However, he wasn't fond of the idea, preferring to stay hidden. Rina, on the other hand, pointed out that naming the dungeon and strengthening the monsters were crucial steps. Encouraging him to choose a fitting name, she explained that it should clearly announce his presence as the Demon Lord of Great Sin and leave a lasting impression on humans. After thinking for a moment, Sotha remembered that Great Sin symbolized crime and punishment. Inspired by this, he decided to name the dungeon Prison of Sins. As soon as he spoke the name, the dungeon core reacted and acknowledged it. With that, Rina proudly declared him the official lord of the dungeon and explained that from the core room, he could manage tasks like summoning creatures, expanding rooms, and adding new floors. Eager to see what he could summon, Sotha went ahead with his first attempt. A one-horned bunny appeared, looking harmless and small. Rina, however, pointed out that it was the weakest type of creature. Ignoring that, he tried again and ended up with a slime. Amused by its bouncy form, he admired it for a moment, making Rina tease him about turning the dungeon into a petting zoo. Laughing it off, he explained that only rank G monsters were available to him. Rina then told him to check the top right corner of the screen. Following her suggestion, he tapped the icon and found a treasure chest symbol. As he selected it, more text showed up, confusing him. Noticing this, Rina explained that it was a gift from the primordial demon lord, meant to celebrate his birth and offer encouragement. Curious, Sotha asked about this demon lord, and Rina explained that he was the first of their kind, essentially the ancestor of all demon lords. Thinking about it, Sotha figured that made him their parent in a way. He also wondered if he would get to meet other demon lords, and Rina considered the possibility, though she suggested focusing on the present for now. Agreeing, he listened as she continued, explaining that special tickets could be used to summon stronger creatures. Some, like the F-rank ticket, worked randomly, while others, such as the D-rank ticket, allowed for a specific choice. Excited, he used the F-rank ticket first. A skeleton soldier appeared, standing firmly before him. Seeing it, Sotha remarked that it perfectly suited the theme of the Prison of Sins. Testing its awareness, he asked if it could understand him. The skeleton nodded in response. Pleased, Sotha welcomed it and encouraged it to work hard in shaping the dungeon. The skeleton, seemingly enthusiastic, gave a sharp salute. Wanting to explore, it moved forward but immediately walked into a wall. Concerned, Sotha checked if it was okay. Sotha examined his remaining D-rank and C-rank summoning tickets, hoping to summon a creature that could communicate well and handle important tasks. He focused on those with strong magical abilities, intelligence, and the capacity for proper conversation. Alongside that, he also considered summoning a creature from the succubus clan, known for its unique magic and charm. After weighing his options, he decided to proceed. Since he was only able to summon rank G creatures on his own, he believed that D and C rank creatures would be crucial for his progress. Hoping for something remarkable, he used the tickets. In response, two girls appeared before him. One, with horns, immediately complimented his looks, while the other, more composed, reminded her to address their master properly. Introducing themselves, the horned girl revealed she was a D-rank succubus, while the other identified as a C-rank archangel. Satisfied with the outcome, Sotha barely had time to react before the succubus threw herself at him in excitement. However, the archangel quickly scolded her for being too familiar. Looking at his growing team, Sotha took note of his loyal homunculus maid, Rina, the enthusiastic skeleton soldier, and his fluffy duo, the one-horned bunny and the slime. Surrounded by this diverse group, he fully stepped into the role of dungeon master. The weight of his responsibility as Demon King settled on him, making him question whether he could truly handle it all. Within the Prison of Sins, the dungeon under his rule, rank G skeletons and goblins were hard at work. Watching them move efficiently, Sotha felt that with just a little more time, it would finally start to resemble a proper dungeon. Rina reminded Sotha that 10 days had already passed since his birth, yet the dungeon remained unopened. In response, he admitted that there wasn't much he could do, given that most of their forces consisted of weak, low-ranked creatures. To make up for their lack of strength, they needed alternative strategies. Even if they managed to attract humans into the dungeon, the risk of being overpowered was too great. Determined to prepare properly, he focused on setting up traps throughout the dungeon. However, Rina suggested using the dungeon core to speed things up. He hesitated, explaining that doing so would cost desire energy. It was a crucial resource required for running the dungeon, summoning creatures, and expanding its influence. DE could be obtained from events triggered by humans inside the dungeon, and a large amount could be gained by eliminating them. However, his initial reserves, gifted at birth, were nearly exhausted, and he still had no way to replenish them on his own. Because of that, he urged everyone to conserve resources as much as possible. Seeing his determination, Rina chose to remain silent. Just then, their discussion was interrupted when a goblin approached. Watching it, Sotha realized it was eager to show off a pitfall it had created. Amused by its enthusiasm, he decided to make things more interesting by challenging the goblin to a competition. Whoever dug the deeper hole would win. Observing his unexpected behavior, Rina couldn't help but comment on how different he was from other demon lords. When he looked confused, she clarified that most demon lords didn't personally get involved in manual labor alongside their subordinates. Before she could continue, their conversation was cut short by the arrival of the succubus. Galacia excitedly shared that she had recently leveled up, and Polar, the archangel, had done the same to better serve him. Hearing this, Rina pointed out that giving true names to D or C rank creatures, as Sotha had done, was highly unusual for demon lords. A true name was a special title granted by a demon king that also strengthened the creature, though there was a limit to how many he could bestow. Regardless, he chose to formally give true names to both Galacia and Polar. Rina further explained that normally only A-rank or higher demon lords had the privilege of granting true names. However, Sotha confidently remarked that he might not encounter an A-rank creature in the future, and more importantly, he genuinely trusted both Galacia and Polar. Touched by his words, Galacia grew even more attached to him, while Polar vowed to exceed his expectations. Just then, Rina glanced at the clock and reminded Sotha that something important was about to happen. When he looked confused, she explained that the grand announcement hosted by the primordial demon lord was taking place today. This would also be his first meeting with other demon lords. However, she clarified that the gathering would only include the primordial demon lord and newly appointed demon lords like him. Even so, with over 10,000 newcomers attending, the event was bound to be crowded. Seeing Galacia's astonishment, Rina added that this was the largest emergence of demon lords in history. Relieved that he wouldn't need to physically attend such a packed venue, Sotha appreciated the convenience of the Dungeon Core's remote participation feature. However, Rina warned him to brace himself. There was a chance that the primordial demon lord might reprimand him for not yet obtaining any DE. Concerned, he asked if this would happen in front of everyone, and Rina confirmed his fears. Determined to stay composed, he called Galacia and Polar over, instructing them to intervene if they saw him faltering. But Polar assured him that they would deal with anyone who dared insult him. Sotha quickly urged Galacia and Polar to listen carefully. He explained that, compared to the other demon lords, they were powerless, a statement that shocked both of them. He then clarified that while his title, the Great Sin, sounded grand, it was more of a curse. Their army was likely the weakest among the new demon lords, and losing his temper would only invite ridicule from the others. Instead, he planned to stay calm, observe the situation, and gather as much information as possible. Rina, intrigued by his approach, asked if he was preparing for the Demon Lord War. Sotha confirmed one day he might have to face the very demon lords he was about to meet. With that in mind, he accessed the event's interface, contemplating potential outcomes and hoping to avoid unnecessary conflict. Still, He couldn't help but wonder what the war would ultimately look like. Finally, he joined the banquet. Galatia gasped at the lavish feast laid out before them, prompting Polar to remind her to maintain decorum. As Sota observed the gathering, he noticed an empty seat at the head of the table. Then, in an instant, a man appeared, raising a toast and shouting, "To new beginnings!" His sudden arrival startled many of the attendees, but Sota immediately recognized him. Rina confirmed his suspicions. This was the primordial demon lord. Addressing the crowd, the primordial acknowledged the unprecedented number of new demon lords, extending his heartfelt congratulations on their births. He then praised their efforts in gathering desire energy and revealed that in just 10 days, 500 demon lords had already reached A or B rank. Hearing this, Galicia blurted out that Sotha had started at S rank. Sotha nodded, confirming it, but the primordial's attention quickly shifted to a demon lord who had already distinguished herself, Aisha. The infernal fiery empress, Aisha confidently acknowledged the mention. The primordial then revealed that Aisha had amassed a staggering 50,000 DE in just 10 days, a feat that left Sotha speechless. To make things even more astonishing, the primordial added that Aisha had the audacity to apprentice under the mighty demon lord Tenpu. Despite the praise, Aisha humbly stated that she was merely fortunate. However, the moment was short-lived, as the primordial then turned his attention to a different matter. There were still demon lords present who had not earned a single D. Sotha was watching the screen when he suddenly got called out, being labeled as too relaxed for summoning only a G-rank entity, despite the spell's restrictions. The remark made the other demon lords burst into laughter, mocking his ability and treating him like a mere minion rather than a true demon lord. Hearing their taunts, Sotha clenched his fists in frustration, but Galatia quickly stepped in, urging him to stay calm. However, the ridicule only intensified, with the demon lords jeering at him for casually granting a succubus a true name. Some even joked about tracking them down and hunting them for fun. Watching the chaos unfold, the primordial king found it amusing to see everyone in such high spirits. Seizing the moment, he suggested holding a grand demon lord war in a month, where each participant could challenge an opponent of their choice in a one-on-one battle. The demon lords eagerly agreed, but Sotha and his allies immediately grasped the danger of the situation. The primordial king then turned to Copper and asked him to pick an opponent. Without a second thought, the bronze demon Bakal stepped forward, announcing his challenge against the Great Sin. Sotha felt his heart sink, realizing that Bakal was acting on his own without hesitation. Before he could react, the primordial king made it clear that any demon lord who tried to avoid the war would be personally dealt with. As Sotha struggled to process the situation, Bakal taunted him, pointing out that he had backed himself into a corner. There were only two choices left, either fall to Bakal or be erased by the primordial king. Under immense pressure, Sotha had no choice but to accept the challenge. Satisfied, Bakal sneered, telling him to enjoy his last month as a pathetic demon lord, before bursting into laughter. The screen then went dark. Determined to take control of his fate, Sotha immediately turned to Galacia and Polar, ordering them to start preparing. With his resolve strengthened, he swore to prove them all wrong. Even if they were seen as weak or insignificant, they still had their pride, and he was determined to make everyone regret underestimating them. Deep inside an old forest dungeon, abandoned long ago, stray gank creatures had turned it into their home. In its depths, a skeleton soldier clashed fiercely with a goblin. Watching the fight, Sotha confirmed that only gank creatures appeared in this area, prompting Polar to remark that it was the ideal place for some serious leveling. Earlier that morning, Rina had suggested taking on a quest to sharpen their skills. She had asked if Sotha had ever considered combining items, but when she noticed his confusion, she brought up his obsession with spinning the gacha wheel. Sotha admitted he had been caught up in the excitement of pulling EX or double SS rank items. Rina then explained that some of those items were actually meant for fusion, capable of evolving monsters into stronger forms. Hearing this, Sotha immediately wanted to try fusing items before the Demon Lord War. However, Rina pointed out that fusion required the dungeon to be at level 8, while his was only at level 6. She further explained that leveling up the dungeon involved either expanding its structure or enhancing the monsters within it. Realizing that strengthening his monsters could also raise the dungeon's level, Sotha decided it was time to power up his forces since their dungeon was now open for business. Back in the forest dungeon, he watched as the skeleton soldier charged forward without hesitation, impressed by its fearless nature as an undead. Just then, Galaxis sensed something unusual and quickly warned him that several people were approaching. In response, he asked her to scout ahead. She then questioned if she could go all out if they were attacked. Amused, he gave her permission, as long as the opponents were low level. Excited by the approval, Galacia happily set off. Meanwhile, in another section of the dungeon, goblins were being effortlessly taken down by adventurers using Flame Slash and Blazing Edge. The healer, Lana of the Skywolf Claws, complimented swordsman Lux on his skills, but he modestly credited her body enhancements. As the group discussed gathering G-rank loot and how the dungeon was perfect for rookies, their conversation was suddenly interrupted by a voice commenting on how cute it was that they were beginner adventurers. Startled, they turned to see Galacia, who casually asked if they could help her practice some wicked magic. Realizing she was a succubus, the adventurers were surprised to see what seemed to be a D rank in this dungeon. Their shield-bearer quickly instructed the mage Escalade to appraise her. To their shock, Escalade discovered that Galatia's abilities were far beyond her supposed rank, placing her closer to B rank, suggesting she might be one of the Demon Lord's elites. Alarmed, the male adventurers prepared to fight, but Galatia playfully remarked on how scary they were, causing the men to blush. Their flustered reactions immediately drew sharp remarks from the female adventurers who demanded that they focus. Lux hesitated to attack, noting that Galatia genuinely looked frightened, but Eskel dismissed it as an act. Deciding not to take any chances, Eskel and Lana prepared to strike, only for Lux to block them with his blade. The men quickly stepped in, exclaiming that they wouldn't let anyone harm Galatia and bracing for a fight. Watching this unfold, Eskel realized that the succubus's charm was far stronger than expected, while Lana grew increasingly concerned about Lux. Regardless, the men charged ahead, completely enthralled. Galacia praised their efforts, encouraging them to keep going. She simply needed to stall for a little longer. Soon, even the women would fall under her enchantment. Ever since she had ascended from lust magic C to A after receiving her true name, her abilities had become significantly more powerful. A short while later, she returned to Sotha, who asked how things had gone. With a smirk, she revealed that her plan had worked. The adventurers were now completely under her control and would follow both her and Sotha's orders without question. She even suggested that they could be used as a force in future wars. Amused by the idea, Sotha asked if he could issue a command, to which Galatia eagerly agreed. Sotha instructed Galatia to keep the adventurers' free will as intact as possible, while subconsciously compelling them to promote their dungeon. Surprised, Galatia asked if that was all. He explained that since the adventurers were low level, forcing them to fight would only slow them down. Instead, it was better to use them as a long-term asset to advertise the dungeon. Galacia, however, still believed they could at least serve as shields, prompting Polar to call her out. He reminded her that this was simply how their master operated. Accepting the reasoning, Galacia commanded the adventurers to return home and spread word about the prison of sin. Without hesitation, they complied and departed immediately. With their task complete, Sota suggested heading back as well. Upon their return, they were warmly welcomed by Rina, who immediately asked if he had recruited humans into their ranks. Caught off guard, Sota asked how she knew. Rina explained that a wave of gifts and achievements had just arrived at the dungeon core, making it clear that something significant had happened. Curious, Sotha checked the rewards and was surprised to see achievements for dungeon expansion and setting up 50 traps. However, what puzzled him most was an apology gift from the Primordial Lord. Rina speculated that the Primordial might be feeling remorse for abandoning him during the last gathering. Regardless of the reason, Sotha was thrilled when he discovered that the Wound Relief random draw had granted him 2 B-rank monster tickets. Eager to see his new summons, he immediately used the tickets, summoning a B-rank Blizzard Eagle and an explosive Demon Spider. Upon seeing them, he was awestruck by their size, which matched his expectations for B-ranked creatures. Polar noted that this addition would significantly boost their overall strength. Excited, Sotha welcomed the Blizzard Eagle, but the creature suddenly started making noise. Noticing its behavior, Rina explained that the eagle wielded ice with absolute mastery. Sotha found this incredibly versatile and continued to gush over its abilities. However, before he could test them out, Rina informed him that a visitor had arrived. Curious, Sotha asked Rina if the visitor was the Demon Lord of the Royal Tiger. She confirmed it and explained that this particular Demon Lord was a veteran, crowned with a prestigious S-rank demonic name. Nervous, Sotha admitted that he had invited a rival Demon Lord purely to learn more about the upcoming war. A voice then responded, cautioning him to stay on his toes, for in the blink of an eye, everything could turn upside down. Before he could react, Sotha suddenly lost consciousness. As he collapsed, the girl was abruptly halted by a sword. Polar immediately commanded her to freeze, but she only smirked in amusement. She took a moment to analyze the lineup before her. An F-rank skeleton squad commander, a G-rank one-horned rabbit known for its charging attacks, and a G-rank slime assigned to the cleaning crew. Her gaze then shifted to Sotha's ice-crafted doppelganger and his fiercely loyal retainers, who never hesitated to charge into seemingly impossible battles. Meanwhile, Sotha, regaining awareness, realized that battles extended far beyond the Demon King War. The decoy created by the Blizzard Eagle had been a crucial move, allowing him to assess the situation. However, Polar warned him that revealing himself now could be dangerous. Yet, Sotha acknowledged that the girl had already seen through the decoy. Hearing this, the girl let out a laugh, stating that such clever tricks were exactly what she appreciated. She then introduced herself as Mildred, the Demon Lord of the Royal Tiger. Beside her, she also introduced her formidable partner, Typhoon. Knowing that he stood before S-rank entities, Sotha felt immense pressure, but he remained composed and extended an invitation for them to explore his dungeon. As they toured, Mildred keenly observed the dungeon's design, noting that its strategy relied more on traps than the sheer strength of its monsters. She examined the various hidden mechanisms and creatures lying in wait, recognizing it as a well-suited approach for a rookie demon lord. With a smirk, she admitted that she had initially laughed upon hearing that Sotha could summon only G-rank creatures. However, she couldn't help but admire how seriously he took his role. In response, Sotha firmly stated that he had no intention of dying. Losing was simply not an option. Their taunts had only strengthened his resolve, and he had no intention of settling for a simple act of revenge. Seeing his determination, Mildred took an interest in him. She started giving him advice and introduced the concept of mixture, a method that allowed magic names to be fused with creatures. Hearing this, Sotha recalled Rina's earlier lesson on mixing, where she had explained that up to 4 elements from magic names, creatures, and holy creatures could be combined. However, she had also warned that using a magic name carried the risk of unpredictable mutations. To Sotha's surprise, Mildred offered her royal tiger for his first attempt at mixing. Though he admitted he wasn't skilled enough yet, Mildred reassured him that this time his level wouldn't be a concern. She then explained that mythical names like her King Tiger Blaze had special meanings and effects. For example, mixing the mythical name King Tiger could enhance agility and make it easier to master common skills. Hearing this, Sotha recalled that Galaxy and Polar had shown interest in using his magic name for blending. That moment of realization helped him understand the ultimate creature they needed to merge to shift the course of the war. With that, he finally decided to fuse the King Tiger. 3 days later, the battle between Bakal and Sotha's groups began. The commentator announced the start of the Demon Lord War, introducing the battlefield as a massive wasteland where their dungeons had been temporarily transferred using magic. He then introduced himself as Sharp, the Sound Spirit Demon Lord, and excitedly kicked off the match, eager to see which of the 2 newcomers would claim victory. Confident in his strength, Bakal declared that the outcome was already decided. He boasted that his army of over 3,000 bronze knights would wipe out the weak, guaranteeing a flawless victory while he watched from the peak of his bronze tower. Sharp then explained the win conditions. Either take down the enemy commander, or destroy their dungeon core. Once both sides confirmed their readiness, Sharp officially signaled the start of the Demon Lord War. Bakal quickly assessed his opponent's army, noting that most of the creatures were G-rank with only a handful of C or D-rank monsters summoned through tickets. Confident in his advantage, he ordered his troops to charge straight ahead and crush Sotha's forces. However, before they could advance, his A-rank High Ogre Burks suddenly warned him about a rapidly approaching beast from above. Hearing this, Bakal scoffed at Sotha, calling him a fool for assuming the area was unprotected just because most of their forces were stationed at the front. Without hesitation, he commanded his archers to shoot down the incoming eagle. As the arrows flew toward their target, the eagle unexpectedly froze them mid-air. Witnessing this, Bakal's troops were left in shock, realizing that the creature had neutralized every single arrow. It was then that they grasped the true situation. Sotha had somehow summoned creatures above C rank. Before they could react, the eagle released the bag it had been carrying, dropping it directly onto Bakal's army. The moment it hit the ground, a massive explosion erupted. Stunned by the sudden attack, Bakal hesitated for a moment. Meanwhile, Sotha proudly explained that the airstrike had been executed using explosive eggs, a product of the demon spider's skill known as egg bomb creation, designed to disrupt their formation. As Bakal's troops struggled to regain their composure, they unexpectedly started attacking each other. Noticing the chaos, Sharp remarked that the army struck from above had now descended into confusion and infighting. Outraged by the situation, Bakal furiously demanded an explanation for what was happening. Sotha mentioned that although his magical name restricted him to summoning only G-rank creatures, his status as an S-rank demon lord granted him a special ability tied to the deadly sin attribute. This allowed him to infuse his targets with magic linked to the 7 deadly sins. In this case, the demon spider's eggs had absorbed an overwhelming amount of fury magic, making the enraged creature lose all sense of reason and attack blindly. Using the resulting chaos to his advantage, Sotha incorporated the well-known King Tiger title to amplify his power. This triggered the evolution of the Demon Tiger Spider, whose offspring hatched instantly and began moving on their own. Additionally, he infused these baby spiders with sloth magic, which caused any creature caught in the blast to become sluggish and unwilling to fight. As expected, Baka's army descended into confusion, with soldiers either turning against each other or becoming too lethargic to continue. Observing this, Sharp acknowledged Sotha's clever strategy and pointed out how the army was falling apart. At the same time, Sotha noted that their opponents had rushed in without considering his abilities. and he planned to keep them trapped in abnormal conditions to secure victory. However, Burks suddenly arrived on the battlefield. With a loud roar, he struck down his own allies. Sharp noticed that Burks was deliberately taking out the quarreling monsters in one go, possibly to prevent further weakening of his side. Watching this, Sotha became curious about Burks' identity and soon discovered that he was a named creature, much like their ogre spider, and had been granted his title by a senior lord. Understanding this, Sotha compared the situation to his own, as he had also been mentored by someone powerful. Even so, he believed that rank wouldn't matter if he could trap Burks within his next blast. Determined, he set his spiderlings up for an explosive sneak attack. Meanwhile, an A-rank warrior from Bekal's army moved toward Haiga. Sharp recognized him as the bronze-armored king, Bronze, who wielded his weapon with devastating power. With only Burks and Bronze left on Baka's front lines, Sharp questioned whether Sotha's army could handle two A-rank opponents as they neared the Prison of Sins. Sotha, growing frustrated, noticed swarms of G-rank monsters blocking the entrance. Sharp pointed out that some carried explosive eggs on their backs and wondered if Sotha intended a direct assault. Watching the situation unfold, Sotha apologized to his forces for the tough battle ahead. However, despite launching continuous attacks, neither Bronze nor Burks wavered, cutting through the waves of monsters before stepping into the blast zone. Sotha could only watch in frustration as the two finally reached the entrance. With no signs of slowing down, the Sins dungeons were on the verge of destruction within moments. Sharp started to wonder if this was the end for the Sins army. Meanwhile, Mildred couldn't ignore the fact that countless demon lords were observing the battle through their cores. Many of them had mocked Sotha before, but now she was eager to see if he would turn the tide and take revenge. As the battle raged on, Sotha noticed that his monsters weren't doing enough to stall the enemy's advance. Frustration built up inside him. He couldn't just stand by and do nothing, yet his lack of new skills made him feel powerless. Amid the chaos, a skeleton soldier hurled a knife at Burks, but it was effortlessly deflected by his axe, leaving the skeleton visibly shaken. Seizing the moment, a group of one-horned rabbits aimed at Burks' blind spot, their bombs detonating at his feet. The sudden blast shattered Burks' will to fight, just as it had with the other beasts outside. With Burks down, only Bronze remained. Seeing an opening, Sotha commanded Polar and Galacia to strike. Without hesitation, the two launched their attacks, Shadow Lance and Holy Javelin, at Bronze. However, Bronze remained still, waiting for the right moment, before countering with a powerful Whirlwind Slash. Realizing the danger, Polar panicked and desperately called for the Demon Spider's help. The Demon Spider wasted no time pinning Bronze down, keeping him restrained. But before the team could fully subdue him, Sotha decided to shift focus, targeting Burks, who remained sluggish under the laziness effect. Just when it seemed like he was down for good, Burks suddenly revived and launched a brutal attack, striking both the Demon Spider and Bronze. The impact was enough to knock Bronze out of the fight entirely. Watching this unfold, Sotha wondered if the sloth effect had finally worn off, but it soon became clear Burks had no hesitation in taking out his own allies. At that moment, the core informed Sotha that the dungeon's level had surged to 8, unlocking a new ability called Fusion. He speculated that Bronze's defeat had triggered it, but he felt too overwhelmed to activate it immediately. However, with the urgency of the battle pressing on him, he was encouraged to use it without delay. Deciding to take the risk, he called for Galacia and Polar, instructing the rest of his subordinates to hold off Burks for 3 minutes. Once they agreed, he expressed his gratitude before teleporting to the core room using his Demon Lord abilities. There, Galacia and Polar questioned his urgency. Sotha quickly explained that reaching dungeon level 8 had unlocked Fusion, leaving no time for hesitation. He revealed that he had already selected the necessary items for the process. Given his cursed name, there was a high chance of ultra-transformation occurring. Though the risk of unpredictable or even weaker transformations loomed, he asked for their consent to undergo the process for the sake of the dungeon's survival. Without a second thought, they agreed, reminding him of their vow to fight for his victory from the moment they were summoned. Grateful for their trust, Sotha immediately activated Fusion, unleashing a powerful burst of energy. As the transformation took place, he declared himself a lucky demon lord. When the process was complete, Galacia had become the Asmodeus of Lust, while Polar had transformed into the Sat Annual of Wrath. Stunned, Sotha could only stare in awe. Meanwhile, the two looked at him expectantly, asking if their new forms appeared strange. Without hesitation, he reassured them, saying they looked incredible, almost divine. Not wanting to waste any more time, they focused on their mission. Galacia, realizing the urgency, offered to help Eagle hold back the enemy reinforcements outside, while Polar decided to face Burks directly. Before leaving, they both insisted that Sotha stay in the core room to monitor the situation. Once they were gone, he was surprised to see them teleporting on their own. something he still needed the dungeon's core to do. Outside, Burks took a direct hit to the face. Sharp noticed that a skeleton soldier had been throwing explosive eggs at him, but the High Ogre barely reacted thanks to his berserker skill. Even though the skeleton fought with everything it had, Sharp saw no way for it to survive. Understanding how serious things had become, the skeleton soldier decided to use its full strength to protect the dungeon. Sharp, however, mocked the effort, seeing it as a pointless last stand. Just as things seemed hopeless, Polar suddenly appeared and blocked Burke's axe, leaving Sharp in shock. The skeleton, overwhelmed, called her an angel, but Polar firmly stated that she was no longer the archangel it once knew. Turning to Burks, she scolded him for destroying the dungeon's carefully built structure and warned him to prepare for his end. Without hesitation, she unleashed a powerful spell that sliced Burke's body clean in half. Sharp, frozen in disbelief, struggled to process what had just happened, realizing that the mighty High Ogre had been wiped out in an instant. Polar's transformation into an enigma-ranging being with incredibly high stats left him astonished, making him question how Sotha's army had such terrifying creatures. Meanwhile, unrest spread through the wilderness as a battalion of Bakal's warriors advanced toward their own dungeon. Inside the core room, Bakal pleaded with his subordinates to stop and demanded to know their intentions regarding his core. However, they acted as if they couldn't hear him, forcing him to desperately remind them of his authority. Noticing their actions, Sharp speculated that Bakal's subordinates might be rebelling, while Galacia, now empowered with Sotha's magical name, encouraged them to destroy the core. With her newly gained power of lust, her enchantment had become irresistible. As an E-rank entity with stats exceeding 99, her strength was unparalleled. Despite Bakal's desperate pleas and warnings about the consequences, his subordinates ignored him. Determined not to fall here, he resisted until the very end. But when the core finally shattered, all he could do was demand they stay back before vanishing along with it. While Sharp stood frozen in shock, the primordial king praised Sotha for the victory. In response, Sharp proclaimed that Sotha had accomplished an immense and decisive triumph. As the cheers of his subordinates echoed in celebration of their victory, Sotha finally felt a bit of relief. However, memories of the battle remained fresh in his mind, and he couldn't ignore the losses on both sides. Guilt weighed heavily on him, making him blame himself for everything that had happened. Noticing his somber expression, Mildred called out to him, reminding him that a victorious commander shouldn't look so down. Hearing her words, Sotha was surprised to see her and immediately asked how she had arrived. In response, Mildred explained that she had come because the demon lord she trained had won, and in her excitement, she had rushed over, bringing a feast to celebrate. Sotha thanked her, but admitted that he wasn't in the mood, which left her confused. She acknowledged that he might have his own thoughts to process, but insisted that he shouldn't show such an expression in front of those who fought for him. As he reflected on her words, familiar voices reached his ears. Looking up, he saw Galacia eagerly awaiting the feast, while Polar scolded her for being too casual. The two then informed Sotha that they were finally home and declared that today was a day for celebration. Hearing this, Sotha welcomed them back warmly. Meanwhile, Mildred continued observing the monstrous beings under Sotha's command, admitting that the Sin Army had stolen the spotlight in this war. She pointed out that many demon lords had likely taken notice and warned that some might already be plotting against him. To prepare for these threats, she advised him to strengthen his dungeons, train his monsters, and gather more humans to expand his forces. She even suggested that he build a town, which briefly puzzled him. A few days later, Sotha rewarded his forces by expanding the dungeon and enhancing Eagle through breeding. He also increased their combat power by using his reward tickets to summon new monsters. Among them was a D-rank Flame Wizard and an A-rank Orand of Abundance. While checking the improvements, Sotha praised Orand for the thriving crops, to which she responded that it was all thanks to his efforts in setting up a farm. Out of nowhere, Rena rushed toward him with urgent news, informing Sotha that a message had arrived from another Demon King, Aisha. When he checked it, he saw that Aisha had recently been caught in a war against the Demon King of Thorns and was now seeking his advice on handling the responsibilities of kingship. She also expressed a desire to meet him in person. Recalling that Aisha was the one praised by the Primordial during the banquet, Sotha wondered if he could offer her any valuable guidance. However, recognizing the importance of forming connections with other demon lords, he considered the meeting worthwhile. Still, to prepare for any unexpected situations, he decided to consult Galacia and Polar beforehand. With that in mind, he responded that he would hear her out, prompting Aisha to request transfer permission. Once granted, the transfer process began. Moments later, Aisha arrived and expressed her gratitude for the invitation. She then formally introduced herself as the Demon Lord of Flame and presented her loyal S-rank aide, Dracon. In response, Sotha greeted her and asked what was on her mind. When he brought up the possibility of their enemies forming secret alliances with other demon lords, Aisha confirmed it, revealing that her scout had spotted numerous monsters linked to Mud and Bat within Thorn's dungeon. Realizing that the three demon lords had joined forces, Sotha was taken aback, as he hadn't expected such coalitions to exist. Aisha clarified that there were no rules preventing demon lords from allying with one another. Putting that aside, Sotha questioned why she had chosen to seek his guidance, reminding her that many had dismissed him during the banquet. However, Aisha explained that she didn't care about their opinions. She had personally witnessed his battle and was impressed by his abilities, which was why she wanted his counsel. Hearing this, Sotha understood the weight of the situation. Still, he chose to accept her request, which immediately raised her hopes. Aisha mentioned that Thorn had openly declared war, catching her off guard and forcing her to focus on fighting the mud monsters. Their moisture-based abilities put her forces at a disadvantage, making direct confrontation risky. Sotha, instead of engaging head-on, started considering alternative strategies. His sudden focus on the sky left Aisha puzzled, but he suggested strengthening ground defenses while launching an aerial assault. However, Aisha pointed out that the skies were dominated by the Kumori army. Sotha then speculated that, as Tenpu's apprentice, Aisha might have magic capable of enhancing aerial beasts. Since Tenpu's power likely surpassed Kumori's, this could give them an advantage. Aisha was impressed by how he pieced things together with limited information and felt reassured that consulting him had been the right decision. They then refined their strategy, deciding that Dracon would lead the aerial assault, while ground forces used explosive skills to create distractions. Before leaving, Aisha expressed her gratitude, admitting she was glad she had sought his advice. Sotha in turn said he had found their conversation valuable but urged her not to delay any further. As she and her aide departed, Polar complimented Sotha on his efforts. Soon after, she teased him about Aisha's charm, prompting him to ask if she had been watching. She confirmed it, explaining that ensuring his safety was her responsibility, even if such precautions weren't entirely necessary. Hearing this, Sotha felt relieved to have formed bonds beyond Mildred, and realized he had gained some interesting insights. He then noted that Thorn, Mud, and Bat were all rookie demon lords like him, yet their skill in warfare felt far too refined, as if someone far more experienced was guiding them. Polar speculated that someone might be secretly pulling the strings behind the scenes. Sotha agreed, acknowledging that it was a strong possibility. However, rather than dwelling on the unknown, he decided to focus on his own growth. He still had rewards from the war and several fusion items waiting to be used, especially the Deadly Sins magic name card. This card had previously made both Polar and Galatia unbelievably powerful, proving that even though Sotha himself wasn't considered strong, his magic name had an astonishing effect in fusion. Wanting to maximize its potential, he aimed to achieve a true name during the fusion for the greatest enhancement, but he wasn't sure who to fuse the card with. Polar then suggested the Skeleton Soldier, explaining that he had fought bravely on the front lines in the previous war. Strengthening him could also boost the morale of the other monsters. After considering her input, Sotha agreed and thanked her, acknowledging the importance of listening to those directly involved in battle. Pleased by his response, Polar happily agreed. With that, Sotha summoned the Skeleton Soldier to the core room. Soon, footsteps echoed through the tunnel as the skeleton arrived. Sotha thanked him for coming quickly and asked if he wanted to become even stronger. The skeleton eagerly nodded in response. Seeing his enthusiasm, Sotha explained the fusion process, mentioning that one of the cards had to be Deadly Sins, and that up to 3 cards could be used in total. He also told the skeleton that he would grant him a true name during the fusion if he accepted. Excited, the skeleton swiftly selected the cards. Once Sotha confirmed the choices, he decided to bestow the true name Avalon on him. As soon as the fusion activated, Avalon underwent a drastic transformation, emerging in powerful armor and wielding formidable weapons. Now, he was known as the Rogue Hercules of the Abyss. Seeing this, Sotha couldn't help but marvel at his new form. Polar, just as impressed, commented on the overwhelming power radiating from him and decided that she had to put it to the test. Without hesitation, Polar and Avalon started exchanging blows. Confused, Sotha asked why they were suddenly fighting. Polar explained that she had been wanting to spar with Avalon ever since he had helped her in battle, and it seemed Avalon felt the same way. Worried about the potential destruction, Sotha suggested they move their match to the newly built arena, which was reinforced with a barrier strong enough to contain their power. Agreeing to the idea, both Polar and Avalon quickly teleported to the arena. Watching them leave, Sotha felt relieved that the arena's defenses were already proving useful. That moment made him realize the need to construct more areas capable of handling rank X combatants. However, before he could think further, Galacia interrupted with urgent news. An enemy was approaching the dungeon. Alarmed, Sotha immediately asked which Demon King was responsible, but Galacia clarified that this wasn't the work of a Demon King. Pressing for more details, Sota was stunned when she revealed that the intruders were actually humans, top-tier SR rank adventurers heading straight for their dungeon. Upon reaching the dungeon, the adventurers hesitated, wondering if this place was truly the infamous prison of sin. The firearms specialist, Grant, questioned why they were assigned to such a seemingly weak dungeon. Meanwhile, the martial artist, Vale, complained that all he sensed were low-tier creatures like goblins and horned rabbits, barely ranking at G. Their leader, Reddish, reminded them that they had no say in the matter since this mission came directly from the higher-ups at Vulcan. The ninja, Surara, added that she couldn't refuse the request either, as it had come from their hometown. Hearing this, the vice leader, Kyle, agreed, pointing out that no one would argue when such a high reward was on the line. The enchanter, Nina, casually suggested that they should just locate the dungeon core and destroy it. With that, the S-rank party, Crimson Butterfly, confidently assumed the task would be simple. As they discussed their plan, 2 goblins suddenly appeared from the cave. Without hesitation, Reddish struck them down with her spear, unleashing her dragon flame technique. The goblins were instantly reduced to ashes. Afterward, she urged the group to move forward and search for the next floor. Meanwhile, Grant and Kyle exchanged a glance, feeling a bit sorry for the weak creatures. However, Reddish caught them in the act and questioned if something was wrong. Both quickly denied it, not wanting to look soft. Moving on, Grant suggested they hurry up, finish the mission, and go out for drinks. But before he could get too excited, Surara cut him off, warning him not to rush ahead carelessly. Right then, Grant unknowingly stepped on a magic circle. To their shock, the trap activated, despite their earlier use of warding spells. What they didn't realize was that Sotha had been watching everything from afar. Though he was initially concerned that the trap might not work against an S-rank party, the teleportation magic activated perfectly, thanks to the combined power of Galatia and Polar. However, Sotha regretted not placing the trap slightly further back, thinking it could have minimized the disruption. Seeing his frustration, Rina advised him to treat this as a learning experience for future improvements. With that in mind, Sotha began thinking that something about this situation felt off. Even though the Skywolf party had been influenced to promote the dungeon, it remained officially categorized as a low-level G-rank site. So when an S-rank party arrived and mentioned Vulcan, it naturally raised suspicions. The labyrinth city of Vulcan stretched at the foot of the blazing volcano dungeon, and the fact that they had been sent from there implied that the Demon King of the Infernal Volcano had caused some disturbance. Rina then pointed out that the adventurers were unaware that the request had come from the Demon King, assuming it was just an ordinary mission from their town. Upon hearing this, Sotha felt the timing was ideal since he had been searching for capable individuals to aid in the next stage of his plans. Meanwhile, in the arena area, Grant asked Sarara for the secret password. She responded with the words "green butterfly." Hearing this, he reacted with surprise, remarking that switching out a person mid-transit wasn't a common trap. However, she clarified that being scattered and transported like this was actually a classic method. Following that, she started reprimanding him for acting recklessly and rushing ahead, prompting him to try and calm her down. Just then, he noticed something. The sound of footsteps approaching made them tense up, and without hesitation, they both drew their weapons. Moments later, Avalon appeared before them. The moment Grant saw him, he activated his quick trigger ability, while Sarara launched her wind bullet technique. However, before their attacks could land, they simply vanished. Shocked, Grant realized that their strikes had completely disappeared without leaving a trace. This led them to assume it was some kind of special skill, though they had no idea that Avalon possessed the ability to nullify all skills and magic from a chosen target. Understanding that Avalon wasn't just some weak Gi rank, Suara quickly changed her approach, using her ninja art to cast Shadow Shuriken Clone Technique. Yet, just like before, the shurikens vanished instantly. Grant stepped forward next, unleashing his storm of magic bullets. However, just like before, the attack had no effect. Meanwhile, Avalon shifted its weapon from a sword to a bow. The moment Grant saw this, he instinctively shoved Sarara aside and shouted for her to run, but Avalon remained locked onto them, releasing a powerful arrow aimed straight at Grant. As the dust settled, Sarara frantically called his name, only to freeze in shock when she saw him. His arm was gone. Rushing to his side, she urgently asked what had happened, but instead of answering directly, he simply remarked that he finally understood why they had been chosen for this mission. Before they could process the situation further, a voice suddenly interrupted, commending Avalon's performance. Alarmed, Sarara snapped at the unseen figure, accusing them of taking things too far and demanding to know who they were. Meanwhile, on the 4th level of the dungeon, the Eternal Sky Zone, Nina apologized for lowering her guard and getting caught in the rain. She admitted feeling frustrated that her trap-evading magic had failed, but Kyle reassured her that it wasn't her fault, placing the blame on Grant's recklessness instead. Feeling relieved, she smiled and thanked him. Despite the tense situation, a small part of her couldn't help but enjoy the moment, as being alone with Kyle felt like an unexpected chance to be with the guy she admired. However, her excitement quickly faded when she realized her wet clothes were starting to freeze, making her increasingly uncomfortable. At the same time, Kyle found himself noticing how cute she looked, but quickly shook off the thought, reminding himself that he was already with Reddish. Still, no matter how much he tried, he couldn't completely stop himself from sneaking a glance. As the relentless rain continued, Nina hesitantly mentioned that they might not have much choice but to start moving again soon. Before Nina could say anything else, Kyle unexpectedly pulled her into a hug and agreed with her assessment. Then, without warning, he pinned her down, suggesting that they could afford to relax for a while. Observing this, Galatia found it amusing how easily humans gave in to their impulses with just a slight nudge from her lust spell. Still, she allowed them to indulge, knowing that their growing desires would serve as the perfect feast for her. Once they were completely spent, she intended to drain everything from them, leaving them utterly empty. Meanwhile, Reddish and Vale were completely drained from battle. At the level 5 gates of hell, they had struggled against Polar, whose unique ability to nullify all magic and skills made their attacks useless. Frustrated, Reddish began questioning why such an overwhelmingly strong opponent even existed in an otherwise unimpressive dungeon. Just then, Polar stepped forward and coldly stated that she wouldn't tolerate anyone insulting her master's cherished dungeon. With that, she declared that Reddish should burn to ash. Seeing this, Vale tensed up, growing anxious for Reddish's safety, but just before Polar's attack could land, Sotha intervened, reminding her that securing the group's cooperation should be the priority rather than resorting to unnecessary violence. Though reluctant, Polar backed off, and Sotha took the opportunity to point out that both she and Avalan needed to exercise more restraint. Hearing this, Polar lowered her gaze and muttered an apology. On the other hand, Vale, still wary, cautiously asked who Sotha was. In response, Sotha introduced himself as the ruler of this realm, the Demon King. Reddish, caught off guard, found herself taken aback by his appearance, as he seemed more like a refined gentleman than the terrifying figure she had expected. Before she could fully process everything, Sotha inquired about their plans, leaving her even more confused. He then casually mentioned that Grant and Sarara had already surrendered, while the other pair seemed to be enjoying themselves, which only added to Reddish's bewilderment. Finally, he posed a direct question. Did she still wish to resist? He added that he wouldn't mind if she decided to join Polar. At this, Vale immediately spoke up, firmly stating that he had no intention of making a reckless decision. Without hesitation, he dropped his weapon, signaling his surrender. Noticing this, Sotha's expression softened, clearly relieved by Vale's choice. Bridges, however, wasn't satisfied. She demanded to know what Sotha planned to do with them since he had mentioned needing their cooperation. Confirming her suspicions, Sotha explained that he merely wanted them to understand his true intentions. He then revealed his grand plan, to construct a city entirely of his own design. With that, he proposed that they join forces to bring his vision, the Ark, to life. At the base of a massive fiery volcano lay the labyrinthine city of Vulcan. Within the Vulcan Adventurers Guild, the receptionist looked startled when Kyle abruptly announced that their base would be relocating. Seeing her reaction, Kyle smirked and remarked that even he found the situation absurd. Just hours earlier, they had learned that Sotha intended to build a city where humans and monsters could coexist in harmony. After confirming his plans, Sotha requested their help in moving their base to his city and sought their insights on city planning from a human perspective. However, Kyle scoffed at the idea, calling it ridiculous. He outright refused, arguing that no sane person would willingly become a puppet for the Demon Lord. At this, Galatia chuckled and teasingly asked if he wanted her to recreate the moment she had captured him and Nina. Kyle immediately shut down the suggestion, his expression darkening. Watching this, Grant sighed and urged Kyle to calm down, pointing out that Sotha and his group had no immediate intention of harming them. He added that, unless Kyle wanted to suffer more injuries, perhaps even requiring a prosthetic arm, he should think carefully. Hearing this, Surata turned to Grant with concern, asking if he was truly okay. Grant offered a reassuring smile and even joked that his shooting accuracy seemed to have improved despite the loss of his arm. Similarly, Reddish admitted that resistance was futile in their current situation. While she wasn't thrilled about cooperating with the Demon King, she was open to working with him as long as his plan wasn't harmful. Her pragmatic stance surprised Kyle, who had expected her to resist more. Satisfied with their decision, Sotha nodded in approval and thanked them. He then informed the group that he would personally be visiting Vulcan for a study trip. He instructed them to prepare to guide him and facilitate the relocation of their base, an announcement that left everyone dumbfounded. As they struggled to process the idea of the Demon King inspecting a human city, Sotha turned to Polar and Galatia, ordering them to disguise themselves as humans. Though still reluctant, Kyle begrudgingly accepted that if their leader had already decided, he had no choice but to comply, for now. And with Galatia standing guard, there was little they could do for now. Even so, Kyle silently vowed that one day he would bring Sotha down, and he hoped the Demon King would be prepared for that moment when it came. Meanwhile, Polar took note of Sotha's distant expression. When she asked if something was wrong, he admitted that he had just felt an intense chill down his spine. Shaking off the feeling, he turned his attention back to their surroundings. Polar observed the lively atmosphere, commenting on the vibrant energy in the area. Nina explained that they had entered the commercial district, a bustling hub filled with shops catering to tourists. She went on to describe how Vulcan's proximity to the volcano granted it access to high-quality minerals, which were used to craft exquisite weapons and jewelry. This piqued Sotha's interest, making him recognize the potential of such unique products in attracting visitors to his own city. However, when he considered his own settlement, he realized that its only noteworthy product so far was the crops cultivated by Orond. He pondered whether they could create something marketable from the silk threads of the demon spiders, making a mental note to explore the idea further. Just then, Nina provided more insight into Vulcan's structure, explaining that the city was divided into 3 distinct zones: the commercial district, the residential district, and the adventurers guild zone. Sotha nodded in understanding, realizing the practicality of assigning specific roles to different districts for better organization. Turning to Reddish, he inquired whether she could handle setting up the guild on her own. Without hesitation, she confidently assured him that an S-rank adventurer establishing a base would naturally attract others, making it easy to form a guild. Pleased with her response, Sotha thanked her and acknowledged how much he had learned from her explanation. With that settled, he instructed her to regroup with Kyle and the others who were in the process of relocating their base, as there were still other matters to attend to. This order left Reddish visibly confused. Watching him walk off, she muttered under her breath, calling him a selfish jerk. Nina, however, pointed out that Sotha was heading straight for the blazing volcano, which only deepened Reddish's confusion. At the entrance of the fiery mountain, Sotha stood firm, gazing at the towering inferno before him. With unwavering determination, he declared that it was time to conquer the volcano, though he admitted he was a little late for the inspection. Turning to Polar, he told her that he was counting on her. In response, she confidently reassured him that no harm would come to him while she was there. Not long after they ventured inside, a monstrous presence emerged from the depths of the volcanic cavern. As soon as the turtle-like creature appeared, Polar swung a punch at it, but right after, more monsters emerged from behind and went straight for Sotha. Before they could land a hit, Polar swiftly kicked them aside. Watching her in action, Sotha couldn't help but remark that she was on fire. Before he could say more, a voice cut in, saying this was the end of the road for them. Turning around, Sotha saw a lion-like monster staring at him. Noticing the difference in strength, he asked if the lion was one of the trusted aides of the Fierce Flame's lord. Instead of answering directly, the lion pointed to a magic circle below and told him to step in. It would take him straight to his master. Hearing that, Sotha scoffed, saying the lion could have just escorted him from the start instead of showing up now. But he guessed the lion had only stepped in because things were getting messy. Annoyed, the lion snapped at him, warning him not to get ahead of himself. While his subordinates were strong, he himself was nothing more than a weakling. Polar immediately turned to him with a sharp glare, asking if he had just insulted her master. The lion hesitated, a nervous sweat forming on his brow. Noticing the shift, Sotha quickly took Polar's hand, telling her to calm down while casually admitting that he really was weak. He reasoned that letting others underestimate him was more convenient. After a brief pause, the lion urged them to enter the magic circle and meet his master. Once inside, Sotha finally came face to face with the great demon lord of Fierce Flames. The demon lord wasted no time, asking what Sotha wanted. Sotha got straight to the point. It was about the crimson butterflies. He wanted to know why they had been sent after him, since he hadn't done anything to provoke the demon lord. In response, Fierce Flame simply stated that he wanted to teach an arrogant kid a lesson about life. However, Sotha wasn't entirely convinced. Eventually, the demon lord admitted he had expected someone controlling thorns, mud, and bats to join Aisha and Sotha, so he thought scaring them off was a good idea. But Sotha saw through it, realizing the demon lord was just tying up loose ends in his own way. In response, Fierce Flame scoffed, questioning why he should bother dealing with the petty conflicts of inexperienced rookies. Sotha questioned whether Fierce Flame truly desired the name of the flame. He explained that winning a battle allowed the victor to claim their opponent's dark name, just as he had earned the title Bronze and equipped his magical beasts with exceptional gear. He then pointed out that if Fierce Flame pushed Homura to his limits in order to take the title of Demon Lord, he would simply step in and snatch victory at the last moment. However, such an act would be nothing but opportunistic and dishonorable. Still, Sotha assumed that someone of Fierce Flame's status as a Gawain wouldn't resort to such lowly tactics. The remark struck a nerve, and Fierce Flame warned Sotha not to test his patience. Without hesitation, he unleashed a surge of intense flames, but Polar immediately stepped in to shield Sotha. To his surprise, she deflected the attack with ease. Realizing her strength, he asked if she was the same being who had taken down the High Ogre with a single strike. Acknowledging her power, he boldly invited her to join him. However, this only fueled her anger. Remembering Sotha's earlier advice to stay calm, she took a deep breath before responding coldly, questioning if he was joking. She then made it clear that she had no interest in following a weak and crude cat. Fierce Flame was furious, but one of his subordinates quickly reminded him that his rage could cause a volcanic eruption. If that happened, the nearby town would be devastated and the DE harvest would be ruined. Left with no choice, he told Sotha to leave, but warned him to stay sharp and not let his guard down. In return, Sotha assured him that he wouldn't fall for any petty schemes. As they stepped into the magic circle and reappeared at the entrance, Sotha reflected on the day's lessons and discoveries. Just then, Polar suddenly called out to him. She hesitated for a moment before asking if he would hold her hand whenever she felt herself losing control. Caught off guard, Sotha asked what she meant, but when he noticed the disappointment on her face, he quickly reassured her that he would support her whenever she needed. With that, he extended his hand, which instantly lifted her mood. Holding hands, they decided to return to the dungeon together. The battle between Aisha and the Thorn Demon King had finally begun, with the treacherous swamp serving as the battlefield. Despite the harsh terrain, the flame forces held their ground with resilience. In a last-ditch effort to shift the tide, Thorn had sought assistance from Mud and Bat, but their side struggled to gain an advantage. Watching the chaos unfold, Sharp casually wondered if Thorn's faction had any hope of turning things around, a remark that immediately irritated Thorn. Frustrated, the Thorn Demon King Rosa insisted that their victory should have been assured since they had properly joined forces, yet every strategy seemed to have been predicted in advance. In response, the Demon Lord of Mud, Gouda, speculated that Aisha's growing closeness with Sotha was the reason behind her success. Adding to this, the Demon Lord of Bat, Badon, pointed out that while Sotha might not be strong, he had both uncanny luck and a sharp mind. Upon realizing that Sotha was guiding Aisha, Rosa reluctantly admitted that they had no choice but to change their approach, though their magic reserves were already dangerously low. Meanwhile, at Aisha's dungeon Castle Homura, Sotha confidently remarked that victory was inevitable as long as they maintained their momentum. Aisha agreed, noting that they had managed without even using the powerful items Sotha had gifted her. However, she hesitated for a moment and wondered whether it was wise to leave such a high-ranking fusion item unused. Sotha then explained that since he had been asked to stay out of the war directly, the items were his way of supporting her from the sidelines. Hearing this, Aisha expressed her gratitude. Their conversation was suddenly interrupted by a girl named Mel, who warned Aisha not to get too close to Sotha. Before Aisha could respond, a deafening noise echoed through the castle, immediately drawing their attention. Outside, a massive creature emerged, its form monstrous and chaotic. Taking in its appearance, Sotha speculated that it had been created from the essence of mud, fused with the names and items of Rosa and Baden. Without hesitation, the creature began launching enormous chunks of mud at the castle. One strike hit the structure, causing the ceiling to tremble and debris to fall. As Aisha's subordinates rushed to her side, the collapsing rubble was suddenly devoured by a slime. Realizing what had happened, Sotha turned to Mel, who had shifted forms to intercept the collapse, and thanked her for the timely intervention. Aisha's subordinates were left speechless by Mel's actions, unable to comprehend what kind of creature she was. In response to their curiosity, Mel revealed that she was nothing more than the weakest monster. To prove her point, she shifted back into her slime form, which left everyone stunned. Slimes were commonly known as the weakest among G-rank monsters, making it difficult for them to believe what they had just witnessed. Seeing their confusion, Sotha explained that Mel had been summoned when he first became the Demon King. Despite her humble origins, she had worked tirelessly, eventually evolving into something remarkable after he combined the names of the deadly sins and granted her a true name. Hearing this, Aisha sincerely thanked Mel, but quickly reminded everyone that they still had a giant monster threatening the castle. Without hesitation, she commanded the ground troops to mobilize and focus their attacks on the giant's legs. As their attacks struck, the massive creature began to wobble. Seizing the opportunity, Aisha ordered Drakon to finish it off. Drakon unleashed a powerful blaze, managing to sever the creature's head. As the head flew off, Sharp couldn't help but remark that the Thorn faction's trump card was nothing compared to Aisha's right-hand man. However, before anyone could celebrate, an urgent warning came from the troops. To everyone's shock, the giant retaliated, catching Drakon off guard with a devastating strike. What was even more unsettling was that the severed head had begun to regenerate. Observing this, Sotha sighed and commented on how troublesome regeneration skills could be. Meanwhile, Dracon grew frustrated with himself for letting his guard down. Before he could react, Aisha called for him to retreat to the castle and ordered the troops to maintain their distance while keeping the giant occupied. Turning to Sotha, Aisha then requested a favor. She explained that she intended to fuse with Drakon and unleash the full potential of the flame's abilities. However, she warned that doing so might completely drain her magic, possibly causing her to faint. Because of this, she wanted Sotha to witness the battle's outcome in her place. Without hesitation, Sotha agreed, promising to recount the valor of her army in full detail. Touched by his words, Aisha expressed her gratitude. Shortly after, Drakon returned to Aisha's side, fully prepared for the next phase of their plan. Aisha kept commenting on the battle, wondering if Aisha, the top rookie, would struggle against the monstrous giant from the Thorn faction. Just then, a bright light spread from the castle. Aisha's troops quickly realized it was healing magic, mending their injuries and boosting their strength. Drakon then gathered everyone's attention, declaring that their victory would be in Aisha's honor. The magic skill Flame had been cast on him, amplifying his power even further. Seeing his transformation, the troops were left in awe. They immediately decided to burn the giant completely to prevent it from regenerating. As continuous attacks rained down, Drakon unleashed his Flame Inferno wave. The creature let out a pained roar as the flames engulfed it. Eventually, the muddy giant crumbled into ash, making regeneration impossible in the scorching heat of Aisha's forces. With their opponent defeated, Drakon pushed the army forward to storm Rosa's dungeon. Inside the dungeon's core room, Rosa's allies were struggling, drained from using magic to control the giant. Even in their weakened state, Baden made a final move, sacrificing himself to summon reinforcements. As flames devoured his body, he entrusted the rest to Fierce Flame's remaining warriors. Meanwhile, back on the battlefield, Drakon spotted something unusual, a strange ring of flames on the ground. Before he could react, it transformed into a magic circle. Realizing it was teleportation magic, he barely had time to prepare before Fierce Flame's double S-rank servant, Iblis, emerged. Wasting no time, Iblis launched his attack. Initially, the soldiers assumed his strikes wouldn't be too dangerous since he was part of the Flames of Fury. However, they were quickly proven wrong when his attacks caused devastating damage. Drakon was just as shocked, and one of the soldiers pointed out that the area touched by Iblis' arm was rapidly decaying. It became evident that Iblis' abilities extended beyond fire. His attacks carried venomous and corrosive properties as well. Mocking his opponents, he claimed their flames were useless against him, daring them to rot away. He singled out Drakon, calling him an imposter lizard. As he launched another attack, something unexpected stopped him. Instead of decay, his strike met a strange, squishy resistance that left him confused. Mel then explained that her barrier was just as gooey and flexible as she was, rendering his decay abilities useless. When Iblis took a closer look, he realized she was a slime. Meanwhile, Drakon heard someone ask if he was unharmed. Recognizing Sotha, he quickly expressed his gratitude for Mel's timely intervention. Reassured, Sotha urged Drakon to stay focused on the battle, promising to handle the outsiders who weren't involved in the war. With that, Drakon commanded his troops to ignore Iblis and charge straight into Rosa's dungeon. Furious, Iblis tried to block their path but found himself stopped by Mel's barrier. She then informed him that crossing it was impossible without her permission. Frustrated, Iblis turned his anger towards Sotha, calling him a fiend. Hearing this, Mel demanded to know why Iblis was speaking so casually about her master. She also made it clear that Aisha's people were off-limits and that she wasn't pleased with Sotha's crew getting involved with them. Overcome with jealousy, she decided to swallow Iblis whole in a fit of possessiveness. Meanwhile, the Flame Army reached the enemy's lines and began burning through it from the outside, aiming to destroy the core without stepping inside. Despite unexpected interference, Aisha's army dominated the battlefield, proving so powerful that even a horde of demon lords couldn't stand against them. Watching this unfold, someone relayed the victory to Aisha, praising how her flame army had united for such an epic battle. Inspired, he decided to follow her example and face his own challenge head-on, setting off for the blazing volcano. In the labyrinth city of Vulcan, Iblis caused chaos, threatening to turn the townspeople into his playthings. Recognizing him, people panicked, wondering why a creature that belonged in the Inferno volcano was suddenly roaming their streets. Meanwhile, Reddish and the others focused on guiding civilians to safety. Without warning, Iblis launched an attack straight at Reddish. Caught off guard, Reddish reminded him that they had only agreed on a pretend attack. Before things escalated, Galashay stepped in, telling Iblis that going overboard wasn't cool. She also reminded Mel that Sotha had given clear instructions not to harm humans and to focus on ensuring their escape. Hearing this, Mel finally returned to her original form. She reassured them that she understood, but added that if Fierce Flame lost control, a volcanic eruption could follow, making evacuation the top priority. However, Galazia noticed her glancing nervously at the volcano, realizing she was more worried about Sotha than the eruption itself. To ease her concerns, Galazia assured her that everything was fine since Polar was with him. Mel then pointed out that Sota often relied on Polar for protection. In response, Galatia explained that she was better suited for backline roles, and Avalon lacked the speed to guard Sota effectively. So, it was only natural for Polar to take on that duty, since she could handle both frontline and backline combat. Despite the explanation, Mel insisted that she could protect Sota just as well. Galacia acknowledged Mel's abilities, praising her powerful barrier that could completely trap enemies. However, she reminded her that keeping humans safe was important to Sota, and that he trusted them to make it happen. This left Mel wondering, why did a demon lord like Sotha care so much about humans? Her thoughts drifted to how he allowed the Crimson Butterfly to come and go freely in their dungeon, and how attentive he was when interacting with the humans in the town he built. Seeing Mel's confusion, Galacia explained that Sotha was simply kind. He had envisioned and created a place where both monsters and humans could coexist peacefully. Mel agreed, acknowledging his kindness. Yet, despite understanding his intentions, she couldn't ignore the slight sting of jealousy she felt. Inside the volcano, Polar had no trouble dealing with the creatures guarding the area. A leopard-like monster attempted to burn her with intense flames, but his magic had no effect. Before he could figure out why, she landed a solid punch, knocking him out. After securing the area, she informed Sotha that they could move ahead. As they continued, Sotha began apologizing for always relying on her, but she dismissed it casually. He then admitted that if he were stronger, he wouldn't have to leave all the fighting to others. In response, she reminded him that even Aisha doesn't fight directly. Sotha explained that Aisha takes charge by commanding and using her flame magic name skill to heal from a distance. Polar agreed, adding that this setup worked well. Her comment left him puzzled, so she clarified that a leader shouldn't be on the front lines. Besides, they already had Orion for healing. While not as strong as Aisha's skill, Orion's healing was still reliable enough to keep them going. Whether in offense or support, there were always others to fill the role, but there was no replacement for their leader. Protecting him was their highest priority. She then urged Sota to stand tall and continue leading them. Appreciating her words, he brought up something important. While attack and healing roles could be replaced, the bond they all shared was one of a kind. So, he asked Polar to keep supporting him. She smiled and agreed without hesitation. Meanwhile, in the fiery throne room, one of Fierce Flame's subordinates delivered a report on the situation. Furious, Fierce Flame scolded him for failing to deal with Polar and Sotha. He scoffed at the idea of losing to a mere monster and a powerless human, but before he could say more, the throne room doors burst open. Sotha walked in confidently, saying he was just stopping by. His presence made Fierce Flame's anger rise even further. Noticing this, Sotha calmly pointed out that he had only come to settle the fight Fierce Flame had started. With a signal to his subordinate, Fierce Flame made it clear that the challenge had already been accepted. Now, his only desire was to have Sotha's head on a platter. Just as he ordered his subordinate to attack, thick smoke filled the room. Noticing the sheer density of it, Sotha questioned whether Fierce Flame had used a special bullet to create it. Fierce Flame confirmed this and explained his plan, to strike from the cover of smoke after confirming that Sotha's monster was immune to both skills and magic. Polar grew uneasy, but Fierce Flame warned her to stay put, threatening to crush Sotha's head. He then mocked Sotha for becoming too dependent on his allies, reminding him that no matter how powerful they were, everything would be over once he was taken down. However, instead of panicking, Sotha began complimenting Fierce Flame's strategy. He then pointed out that it was unfortunate someone as strong as him had to rely on ambushing a nobody like himself, implying that Fierce Flame wasn't as fearsome as he seemed. The remark visibly irritated him, but Sotha wasn't done. He admitted that he knew he was insignificant, but it appeared Fierce Flame wasn't much different. That, in a way, made them quite alike. Hearing this, Fierce Flame's subordinate furiously reprimanded Sotha for insulting his master, but before he could say anything else, his body suddenly detonated. Fierce Flame froze in shock as Sotha casually asked if the subordinate had also heard that. Enraged and confused, Fierce Flame lunged forward, demanding to know what had been done to him. But as he moved, his own body began breaking apart. Seeing his growing fear, Sotha calmly explained that what he was hearing was the chime that heralds the end. As Fierce Flame struggled to understand, Sotha elaborated that once the Wrathful One hears that sound, there is no escape. He then revealed the source of the phenomenon, Polaris' ultimate ability, Ragnarok Gospel, a symphony of destruction unleashed only when she reaches true fury. It was simply Fierce Flame's misfortune that he had chosen the wrong person to take hostage. Overcome with rage, Fierce Flame swore to end Sotha. Unmoved, Sotha simply remarked that he was nothing more than an inexperienced demon lord. Fierce Flame struggled to grasp how someone like Sotha could even exist. Sotha. Later, at the entrance of the Prison of Sins in Ark, Sotha wandered through the area. Under the capable leadership of the Crimson Butterfly, more and more refugees from Vulcan had joined their ranks. For the first time, Sotha felt he had truly lived up to his title as a demon king. Yet, unanswered questions remained. Why did this world give rise to so many demon lords, and what compelled them to battle one another? He promised himself that one day he would find those answers. When he returned home, Galacia greeted him with enthusiasm. Seeing this, Polar quickly intervened, urging her to keep some distance since she was getting a little too familiar. Before their exchange could escalate, a massive slime suddenly loomed overhead. Mel immediately moved to protect Sotha, making it clear that she couldn't devour Galacia, but he asked her to calm down first. Just then, Rina arrived, presenting Sotha with his next mission as a demon lord. After hearing the details, he confidently declared that he would give his all to carry out his duty as the Dark Lord.